Welcome back to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, a pragmatic conversation about any and all things transportation. I am Wes Marshall. I'm a professor of civil engineering at University of Colorado, Denver, author of Killed by a Traffic Engineer. And as always, with me, we have...
I'm David Zipper, senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative, a contributing writer of Vox, and a poster of many things about transportation online.
That's very true. Today we are not live on YouTube. We are pre-recording this because we're both going to be doing a bit of traveling over the next couple of weeks. I think we talked last week about where we were going, but I'm going to Australia first and then to Kansas. And David, you are?
It's quite a juxtaposition, by the way, Australia and then Kansas. I'm sure if you think about Kansas,
a friend of mine is like, oh my God, those could not be any more different. Like going to Perth, Australia, then flying to Lawrence, Kansas.
Yeah. You're going to come back and be like, wow, I'm really not in Australia anymore, Toto.
Yeah.
I am going to Europe. I am giving a couple of keynotes at the Mobi Summit in Lisbon and then at Smart City Expo in Barcelona. So
nice.
I guess between us, we're like on the road for like almost a month.
Yeah.
One of us is gone. Yeah.
So this means that the next episode will likely be pre-recorded as well, but it is what it is, but it's still fun to make these and looking forward to that one too. So today, this morning on the way to work, I was biking in and a friend of mine asked to borrow a chainsaw. So I have one of those chainsaws that's on an extension pole. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? You probably don't have to worry about this where you live, but it was me biking with this chainsaw on an extension pole, which, kind of felt downright medieval in some way. Like I was going to some modern day crazy dangerous joust. But
did they have chainsaws in the medieval time?
No, but it felt like one of the jousting spears. Like,
okay. I'm just trying to picture this. All right, medieval jousting chainsaws. Okay, I'm with you.
There's a cover on it, but it felt like a spear. But there was one year where I with Halloween coming up, I remember biking for Halloween because I dressed as Elliot from E.T. So I had like E.T. in the nice. Thing. Yeah, but it just got me wondering, like, where you grew up in North Carolina, like, what was it like trick-or-treating? Like, was it the kind of thing where you drive to a neighborhood and have to walk around, or were you able just to walk out of your house and start doing it?
So in North Carolina, I grew up in Chapel Hill. It's a college town.
Yeah.
In a sort of like suburban single-family home kind of community. So really could actually just sort of like leave the house and go door to door because, practically every house had a kid. It was a totally kid-friendly neighborhood. The thing was that, I have zero arts and crafts ability whatsoever. And my parents didn't really care. So I remember vividly one year, like how I was like 7, like I couldn't be expected to make my own costume at that age. And I was like, what am I going to be? And my mother had put no thought into it. My dad, neither. And so my mother said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And she got the family binoculars, wrapped them around my neck, had me wear like a t-shirt and jeans, gave me a backpack and hold a book called Audubon's Guide to North American Birds and said, just go and tell everyone you're a bird watcher. It may have been the laziest Halloween costume in the state of North Carolina, but I didn't even think twice about it. Anyway, that's my Halloween memories. How about you?
It sounded like you were describing Dora the Explorer for a second.
Yeah, exactly. I had a traditional Halloween childhood. Like I would go door to door and I just had worse costumes than most kids.
No, I mean, when I was younger, I could just go right around my neighborhood. I mean, as we got older and you sort of know where the richer neighborhoods are, where you're more likely to get a full-size candy bar, we'd kind of venture out a little bit further, but we still walked over there to do it. Where I live now, I live in a very like walkable part of Denver. So it is interesting. There are families that literally drive into my neighborhood, park their car like on our street and walk sort of around our neighborhood. Yeah. So there are a lot of people that live in places where it's not as easy. And like, I noticed that here a lot more than back in Watertown, but yeah, it's a thing. Like it's for a lot of people, it would be hard.
Well,
especially
I
when the
think,
houses are spread out. You're not going to get as much candy. Like, and as a kid, you're like, how much candy can I get in the shortest amount of time?
oh, totally. Yeah,
And
this
it
is
makes a big
introduction to
difference.
math. Exactly. No, but I don't have kids, so I'm not up to speed with like the latest in Halloween trick or treating. But my sense is that it's really changed a lot from like the 80s or 90s when you and I were kids. Like it seems that now I hear, I don't know how common this is, but like like there's kids that are brought to like trunk or treating where it's basically like everybody goes to a parking lot and there's candy in the trunk and you get a piece from each trunk. Have you heard about this?
I've heard
Um,
similar things like mall type things. You can just kind of go from store to store, and all the stores are giving out candy. Or like across the street from where I live, there's kind of like this urban marketplace, and all their stores do the same sort of thing. And some of that's meant for more the littler kids, but um,
yeah, I feel like I don't know. It seems like there's more awareness now about particularly the safety issues around walking. So maybe that's inducing some shifts in behavior. But I'll be honest with you, I'm the last person to be an expert on trick or treating
I,
behavior.
on that front, it is a big deal. I mean, Halloween is the night that more kids die on the streets than any other night of the year. So, I mean, looking at the numbers, you feel like we should just really not allow anyone to drive on that night, or something. Like it seems like
Hmm.
everyone's. I think when you see parents' fears of trick or treating, their fears are of like razor blades in the candy, like which might be real, but the real fear should be the safety, the walking around type part of it.
That's right. I think that that's become sort of like an urbanist argument that comes up every October now, and I think it's fair and it's accurate. Like be afraid. Don't be afraid of someone poisoning your kids. Be afraid of a car driver hitting them. And to a little bit of foreshadowing, we have a good question for mailbag about this very topic. So I'm wary of letting the cat out of the bag, but
All right,
it's
all right.
perfect that we're 2 weeks ahead of Halloween as we record this. So it's topical. It's good.
Well, stay safe out there, and I hope you have a better costume than David did as a
Oh
child.
God, you won't really have a worse one. It was in retrospect, it's kind of cringe, but my mom meant well. I have good parents. Should we do word on the street?
Yes, let's do word on the street. And I just will note, because we're pre-recording this, if something crazy happens the next week before we post this, like just note there's a reason why we're not talking about it, because we don't know yet.
Yep, that's right. And given that we are recording this in October of 2025, the odds of something crazy happening in a 5-day period extremely high. Even in a 24-hour period, you don't know what's going to happen on the
Uh,
front page of the papers.
15 minutes, everything can flip. Like it's crazy.
God,
All right.
seriously. All
All right. So
right.
word on the street.
Word on the street. So this time we're going to do something a little bit different. Word on the street. We're going to talk about a new and interesting piece of research because this felt like it was a topic that Wes and I agreed deserves more attention. There was a new paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research. We'll put it in the show notes, a link to it, by a well-known economist, Enrico Moretti, who's written a lot about economic development, actually, but he this time delved into transportation, in particular, car noise. And the title of this study is The Traffic Noise Externality: Costs, Incidents, and Policy Implications. And what Moretti found was basically what he did. I should explain that first. He looked at it was, I think, pretty clever. He looked at what happened to real estate prices after noise barriers are installed on highways. So, in other words, like let's see if we can understand the value people put on traffic noise, or negative value, I suppose, once the road gets quieter. And what he found was that following installation of those noise barriers, we observe, I'm quoting, we observe an immediate and largely permanent 6.8% increase in real estate prices within 100 meters of the roadway, with smaller gains at greater distances. Moretti went on to find that there's an overall societal cost nationwide in the US of $110 billion from traffic noise. It's regressive. It largely falls on low income residents because they tend to live near highways, which are loud, and that electric vehicles might be able to mitigate a good bit of the harm because they're quieter. So, this whole topic of traffic noise is one that I've written a couple articles about. I find it to be really important and underexplored. And Wes, it's something that I know you've thought about too. So why don't I turn things over to you and hear what you think?
So first off, it matters more than you think. But when I read portions of the paper, that last part you mentioned that EVs could solve the problem, like that's one of the things I disagree with quite a lot. So I mean, when you look at the research on EVs and noise at slow speeds, like less than 20 miles an hour, they're quieter. But once you get up to 20, 30 miles per hour, most of the noise comes from the tire roadway interaction, like
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
from the engine. So, especially the kind of roads he's looking at, which are highways that would need a noise reduction barrier, EVs aren't going to make a lick of a difference. Like the studies I've seen, like literally use the word negligible at those higher speeds. So I think it's far fetched to say that EVs will solve that problem. But the other thing that struck me is that 100 meters thing he mentioned, because I will say, like even on arterials in cities, if you live on the roadway, the
Hmm.
noise can be unbearable. But you go one block off, it's like a different world. It's sort of amazing how quickly the noise dissipates. So it's a little bit different than like the air pollution that sort of extends further out. The noise, you don't have to get far from it to. And a friend of mine just actually moved, and one of the reasons he was living on an arterial not from far from where I live, and like they had this great sort of like front place where they could hang out that was outside, but they could never use it because the noise was hard to even have a conversation. And this is just on an arterial with literally a 35
Hmm.
mile an hour speed limit, right? So
Hmm.
it's not one of these highways he's talking about. So they spend quite a lot more money to get away from that noise. So it does matter. And it is something that affects, I think, everybody. I think that paper said 42 million Americans are exposed
Hmm.
to this. I think the number would be even higher. Just because you're not exposed at your living residence doesn't mean you're not exposed. So I think it's a bigger deal than people realize.
Yeah, I think it is a much bigger deal than people realize. In part because there's been so little research about the costs of traffic noise, particularly compared with the costs of tailpipe emissions from cars in terms of damaging health and creating smog and whatnot. I think a big reason for that is, first of all, it's very hard to disentangle the two because the places that are going to have a lot of car noise are also probably going to have a lot of air pollution from cars, right? Or just sort of particulate matter. And you can sort of like hook up in a lab, you can hook up a contraption to sort of measure what's coming out of the tailpipe without too much difficulty, but it's a lot harder to really get a sense of what the noise looks like. So when I wrote a Slate story a few years ago trying to look at the costs of traffic noise, this was during the pandemic when a lot of streets and roads became quieter, right? Because traffic was way down and people were commenting on how nice it was. You could hear the birds. People were saying, actually, there was a study showing that their bird song was more varied and more vibrant because the birds didn't have to raise the volume of their
I remember
chirping
that.
so much. Remember that?
I
To be
do.
heard over the cars. So, what I when I talk to researchers who focus on car noise, there's only a handful of them. The cost of traffic noise. They basically said like we are just in like the very beginnings of understanding what the costs actually are. Like it's one thing that like what this paper really underscores is people don't like the noise of cars, which makes sense. But there's implicit health risks that I think we are barely understand. Like there was a study. Did you see this one a few years ago of Denmark, which has really, really good health data that because they sort of like can track everybody in a panel data set for years and years. But basically they found that
Is this the dementia one?
yeah,
Yeah.
12% of all dementia cases in Denmark could be tied to the noise from traffic outside a person's home. It's a crazy statistic.
It's incredible. Yeah.
And it's made possible, that kind of analysis is by having a very unique data set that Denmark collects. But there's no reason to think this is just a phenomenon in Denmark and not other countries. So I actually, it's like Moretti is like really observing the value that people put on avoiding traffic noise. But I actually think that the value is actually probably would be much higher if folks actually understood the risks, not just of dementia, but of higher blood pressure and heart conditions and respiratory issues that we're really only starting to understand, but seem pretty serious.
Oh yeah, and even if he wanted to keep the focus on like the economics of it, I mean, there's a proxy I'd sort of offhand would use to decide whether a street is sort of good or bad in some ways, and it's whether you can have like a sidewalk cafe, like where people are willing to sit out on the street and it's not too noisy. Like
Yeah.
that's a sign you're doing something right. And if you put out those chairs and no one's willing to sit there because it is too noisy, it's the opposite. Like it's sort of the canary in the coal mine of an urban street being good or bad. And
Hmm.
like I mean, the economics of that, like those places people use differently, people spend money differently. Like that's all part of it too. It's not just
Hmm.
housing prices being marginally different out on the highways. Like this is a much bigger deal than he could possibly look at it in what he's done so far.
I think that's fair, but I think that's fair. But I think part of the reason I was interested to sort of elevate the study is because there's just so few like it. Like,
Yeah.
thank you for at least getting us started. Let's get some more analysis out there. I would say for those, I know we have a lot of academics and grad students who listen to the podcast because we hear from them, which is great. We love academia, but if you're thinking about an area that could really use some more attention and some thought, I would argue that traffic noise is one that is really ripe for attention, both on in terms of the societal impacts. But if you want to get technical, like I'm really intrigued by the potential benefits of EVs to some extent, but even more so this idea of quiet pavement. Familiar with this? It's like,
Yeah, I'd
yeah,
had heard of them called low noise pavements.
yeah,
And
it's a little
I
more
think they're
expensive, but yeah,
they're
go ahead.
porous, right? So it's like the sound goes into the pavement or dissipates differently. I mean, this is something I would love to ask Norman Garrick about because before he became what he became, he was a pavement guy. So I'm
Was he your
curious.
advisor when you got your doctorate?
Yes, he was my PhD advisor.
He's for
Um,
those who may not know, he's the professor. Is he still a professor at Connecticut or is he elsewhere
he's
now?
emeritus now, so he
Okay.
retired to Zurich. So he's enjoying their
Huh.
great transit over there, and probably not thinking about pavements all that much these days.
No, good life for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a topic that would really benefit from attention from those who do, material science as well as looking at public health, urban planning, and transportation planning. Because I think the health effects are bigger than we probably realize, but also there's equity impacts because we all know that, or a lot of us know that that low income communities are more likely to have arterials and highways going right through them. That means that those communities are more subjected to the pollution and particulate impacts of vehicles, but also the noise. And we've got a long way to go to understand what all that means.
And there are little design things that matter in that. I've seen a little bit of modeling years ago, like talking about how, the difference between having buildings on the street versus parking lots, like that noise expands farther over the parking lots, or having
Yeah.
trees in the way, like things like that can
Yep.
dissipate the noise so much differently. So there's so much like we kind of feel like we know, but we don't. And yeah, you're exactly right, David. We need much more research in this
Yeah.
area.
And not all, this is the other thought I had when I was looking at Moretti's study, not all noise barriers are created the same. Like I've seen some in the Netherlands that are like there's no traffic at all. It's incredible actually how much they can muffle, but others sort of like dampen the sound without eliminating it for the homes that are adjacent. So again, there's just lots and lots of space here to innovate and to learn. But this feels like it is one of those elements of transportation research and policy that we really could use a lot more understanding in.
All right. Should we move on to roundabout?
Let's do roundabout. I think I'm up first. Am I
All
right?
right. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about this week is anti-car activism, and what sort of triggered my interest was a spate of books coming out this fall that are basically arguing something similar, that cars suck, that they're ruining society, destroying the planet. I have a prop. I can show you all three. Here we go. For those watching on YouTube, this is the benefit you get. There's Life After Cars, which was done written by the team behind War on Cars podcast, Sarah Goodyear, Doug Gordon, and Aaron Naparstek. There's Saving Ourselves from Big Car by David Obst, who is a former literary agent and movie producer. And then there's Roadkill, Unveiling the Cost of Our Toxic Relationship with Cars by Henrietta Moore and Arthur Kay, who are an academic and a transit board member from Britain. And I'll say, like, I've read all three of these, which came out in September and October. I wrote an article in Bloomberg, sort of an essay on my sort of reflections. And for what it's worth, if you're going to read one of them, I would suggest reading Life After Cars, which is the most cleanly written, the most substantive, and also I think it has the best ideas for what actually to do about sort of weaning society off of cars. But what I observed in that article in Bloomberg, and I've actually got a Q&A coming out shortly with the War on Cars team about anti-car activism. It's I'd say two quick things, and I'll turn things over to you, Wes. First of all, my observation is that there's definitely more of a anti-car narrative out there in the public than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And that's real. Like even when you think about what happened after Ralph Nader, Run Unsafe at Any Speed in the 60s, the push was for safer cars, not fewer cars. And now it feels like that narrative has shifted to a degree, at least among a pretty well-organized activist class. Maybe that's because of climate change or because people are traveling more to Europe and seeing what cities there have done to rein in cars. Maybe it's because of social media and the internet that makes organizing, sort of urbanist organizing, easier. Maybe it's because, I like to think of this, that car bloat is just so egregious, the SUVs and pickups, that people can really glom onto it. So, but whatever the reason, like, there's definitely more of a narrative out there saying, let's rein in the auto-centric nature of society. But that said, and this is what I wrote in that Bloomberg story came out a few days ago, is, let's be honest, like, the average American, and I even would suggest the average European, I don't think they see cars as a societal problem. I think this is still a left-leaning urban campaign or topic, and we've got a ways to go to be able to make this an issue that resonates even at state levels, let alone at the federal level, which to me is a major issue, because so many of the things, at least in the US, that make this country so dominated by cars are policies set at the national level, like cheap gas, or the focus on funding new highways and lots of stuff like that. And we have to find a way to broaden the coalition, I would argue. So those are some of my initial thoughts, and I know you have many, Wes. So I'll give it over to you.
Yes, I'm of two minds on this. I guess first of all, I am probably going to read all three of the books eventually. I'm definitely going to read the War on Cars one first, but I know full well for a fact how, especially traffic engineers that I know, like transportation professionals, how they react to the War on Cars type media messaging, or the Reddit group that I know you know the name of.
We can't say that here. It's a bad word, folks, but you'll find it if you Google. Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, no, I did a thing for them when my book first came out. But anyways, like, I know, like, a lot of people just turn off. Like, they don't want to even respond to that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Chuck Marohn being one of them. Like, he didn't even want to read my book at first because he grouped it in with that sort of stuff at first, until people were like, no, it's a little bit different. So
Chuck Marohn is the head of Strong Towns, just for people who may not know.
Chuck Marohn, head of Strong Towns. And a lot of people are like that, especially the engineers, where they will just turn off if you're trying to present that sort of argument. And at the same time, I think most Americans probably live in places where cars are their only legitimate option. And when you like look at safety of being in a big car, like you understand why it sort of makes sense for them to also be in a big car. Like if they're not thinking about the externalities and all the stuff you talk about in the car blow pieces. So like from both those perspectives, it's like, what are they supposed to do? Like it is what it is. But I would argue that we built the system. Now at the other end of the spectrum, like tonight in my class, I'm giving a talk about active transportation. And it's a course that covers a lot of topics. So I can't go into too much depth, but I'm doing it from the perspective of it not necessarily always being a design problem or a law problem, like stuff like that. It's often more of a social cultural problem. So I kind of wrap it around Peter Norton's. He wrote the Fighting Traffic book where he goes through the history of jaywalking. And in that history, he shows how they first tried to change the laws and pedestrians didn't care. So then they try to educate pedestrians like, oh, this is where you're supposed to cross. Like you can't cross here anymore. And that didn't work either. But what had to work to get them over the hump was treating it like they started making fun of people that were jaywalking and they treated it like a social cultural thing where it shifted the culture. So from that perspective, I think it's important for the war on cars and groups like that. Like they're slowly, like you said, sort of changing the culture. And that is where it's hard to do. And you're going to get pushback and, it creates a lot of butting heads, but like changing the culture is really what you need in the long term. So I am excited to see what these books have to say, but it's hard. It's really hard to do.
So is that by extension? Are you basically saying this is like an article I wrote in January of this year, arguing that that a way to make carb bloat a sort of like nationally resonant or internationally resonant topic is to think of it kind of take lessons from secondhand smoking and tobacco, and basically recognize that there was a huge push that was very much community driven to basically say, your decision to smoke isn't just yours because you're affecting my well-being and that of my children. And that really caught on, this idea of secondhand smoke, and really sort of powered the anti-tobacco movement of the 1980s and 90s. So if you're saying like we need to change the culture, I wonder if that's part of it, is to basically like get people to sort of tease and mock those who are, like a small person who decides they need to drive a Chevy Suburban. Like, what's wrong with you? What are you compensating for? Blah, 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 blah. Maybe that's actually healthy in some weird way to basically say, like, you know what? We're going to make you feel a little guilty about it.
Yeah, I have a friend in Australia who was kind of going through the history of their PSAs on road safety. And at first, they focused very much on the scare tactics type stuff. And over time, they realized it wasn't working. But then they started making fun of people. So they had what was called the Pinky campaign, where they literally made fun of men driving fast as overcompensating for something. And these women would kind of hold up a pinky. And he's like, that's when they started to see a shift in people's behaviors in culture, like that making fun of things step. So I think it is an important thing to do, but you're going to hit a lot of roadblocks along the way. But right now, if you saw somebody like pull out a cigarette when you're like out at dinner, like if I'm with my kids, people would make fun of that person, right? But 20 years ago, that was the norm. So it has to be like it has to be something bigger than just changing the laws. Like people's perception has to be changed. And, what the war on cars is doing in terms of trying to fight the culture is a part of that.
Yeah, I think, this is if it's a war, it'll be fought on many fronts at once. I kind of think of like the War on Cars podcast, which I think you and I have both been guests on. It's very popular among a pretty narrow slice of society, right? Like it's preaching to the choir. It's to those who are by and large are already thinking we need to have fewer cars. And it's very important to mobilize the base. And I think that's great. And it's important. And I've talked with Doug and Sarah, who are the co-hosts of War on Cars, about this. Like, if you really want to expand the coalition, you've got to find ways of reaching those who don't instinctively resist automobile, especially in a place like the US, where we have almost as many cars as we do people, let alone adults. So I think that carb bloat is one of the topics that can help do that. I mean, I think when I asked Doug and Sarah about it in this Q&A that's coming out shortly, they said that, they really believe that tactical urbanism is a way of showing people what can be achieved. Maybe I still feel like tactical urbanism is not going to change national policy. It's a way of improving things locally. And yes, things can percolate up, but I'm not sure that's enough. I do feel like we need something more. And that's why, I don't know, that's why I spent a lot of time actually looking at the cigarette story or tobacco story, because it feels like people could get mobilized if they worry that the SUVs around them are going to hurt or kill their kids. And that really is, I think, like a paradigm shift if we can live in a society where that's something that's popularly thought about and talked about, because we're not there yet.
No, we're not there yet. And you're right. It's a bigger problem than just, there's no silver bullet for this. So it has to be bigger. And I think we could spend another 10 episodes talking about what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, I know I'm interested to read these books. It's hard to sort of talk specifics because I haven't had a chance to yet. They don't send me the books early like they do people like you. But
yeah. Well, this is you don't get a lot of perks being a journalist or having that hat on. But this is one. I get a lot of books, but that's actually not always a perk, because if the book sucks, you're not really glad that you got a copy of it before anybody else. So
yes, I will spend money on the book so that
you are going to spend money on all three books.
Yeah,
I was going to say, like, I with that, I don't want to say bad things, but I will simply say, if you're going to read one of the three again, I would encourage you to read Life After Cars. I think you'll have a better reading experience.
If you're going to read two of the three, would you say?
I mean, to be totally honest, I might read Life After Cars twice, but that's another story.
I love it. That's fair. Okay.
Over to you, sir.
All right. So my roundabout is kind of a reader question, but it's one I've gotten probably a half dozen times over the last year since my book came out. So I'm not going to speak to any one person here, but it's a very similar theme, and it's hard to kind of give a clear, concise answer. So I thought it'd be worth talking about. So the gist of the question that I'm talking about is basically like, how can a young civil engineer speak out about unsafe or outdated engineering practices without risking their career? So I'll read one quote from the most recent letter we got. "My ethics are constantly challenged every day working here, because by knowing what's wrong, by being constantly pressured by people with more power than me, I fear I'll become complicit in the system." So this is a question I've got a few times, and I have answered it different ways, but maybe this isn't in your wheelhouse as much, but I'm curious, what would you tell a young engineer that's sort of in this position?
What would I tell them in this position?
If you want me to go first,
honestly, I would probably tell them to talk to you. No, I mean, in all honesty, I don't know that I've talked to the engineers. Don't reach out to me with this question the way they do you, because I'm not an engineer. What I do hear, to be honest, though, are from traffic engineering professors who wonder whether they're doing a disservice to society with the curricula that they develop and that they teach. I had a long conversation with one not that long ago, a guy I really respect, who's an traffic engineering professor, who said, like, it just pains me, David, saying to me, that we're producing these traffic engineers who've taken no real urban planning courses, nothing about community engagement. They basically just know the science of engineering. And I feel like we failed them and we failed society by not being able to provide more context. And to me, that's a really meaty, interesting question, but it's also candidly one that, Wes, you're in a much better position to have thoughts about than me, because you're an engineering professor yourself.
Well, that one feels actually easier to me. Like, 'cause, I mean, you're the one teaching. Like, you can still provide that, what you have to provide, but you can give them that context. Like, that's what I do in all my classes. Like, I basically go through, here's how engineers do it. Here's why they do it that way. Like, here's what
you can do that, and I don't want to get out over my skis here, because I'm not an engineering professor, but my understanding is that there's a set curriculum that students have to take with or core curriculum they have to take to graduate. So there's lots. Wes will never take your class or never hear someone like you provide that context and might still go off and become traffic engineers.
Well, I mean, this maybe goes a little too deep into the weeds, but like when I first got here, I systematically taught all our undergraduate courses and just revamped them all. Like I
Oh, really?
totally did what I was just describing. So when somebody else took those over, I gave them all my materials, and now they're using the same sort of thing to teach those courses.
That's great.
But like they're still getting what they need to know to take what we call the FE exam and eventually the PE exam. But going back to the original question, I guess I'd start with this. Like, first off, I don't think these young engineers should be too hard on themselves because they're in a really difficult position. So, like, my advice is often like spend time getting the lay of the land first. Like, try to understand. Like maybe push back ever so slightly and sort of see what reaction you get. Because if you push back too much now, especially as a newly graduated engineer or someone that maybe just took that FE exam, you don't get the last say. Like you're usually working under a PE, a professional engineer. So it's really hard to try to interject everywhere on everything, but it is fair to ask why. Like, why are we doing it this way? Because it's your job as an FE to sort of be an apprentice and learn under the PE and try to get that knowledge. So, a lot of engineers would be like, we don't have time to get into the why, but I had a few that would spend some time talking about these things. And like, maybe if you can get into those discussions, you can start showing and sharing some of your insight. But, my big picture advice is like, honestly, bide your time. Like eventually you're going to be the one with the power, the wherewithal, and the opportunity to do better, to be better. And I say that because we really need people like this person asking me this question in those positions. So you have to be patient.
I mean, again, I trust your perspective on this more than mine because you've been in these positions personally. But I will say, I think what the times I've had conversations with people in a position like this, often I find myself at some point in the conversation, I end up suggesting that they sort of look out like almost like giving advice around self-care. Like if they find themselves in professional situations where they're the ones asking these questions or trying to push things in a more sort of like reformist direction and there's not a lot of people around them who understand why they're asking these questions or having those points of view, I think it can be really helpful to have a community of like-minded people that a person like that can talk to outside of work. And one really good thing, we're talking before about sort of like how the landscape is evolving in sort of like transportation reform circles. A lot of cities now have pretty active like YPT chapters, that's young professionals in transportation, I believe, and have urbanist communities. Like here in DC, that would be Greater Washington. And those are places where, people in their 20s and 30s often get together to socialize and swap ideas and develop ideas with others in the public or private sector or nonprofit sector who are generally interested in safer, better, cleaner transportation systems. And I don't know, I feel like for various reasons, including just, like I said, self-care, it can be really helpful if you find yourself isolated and sort of searching to make sure, like, am I the crazy one to have these sorts of questions, to make sure that you have outlets where you can meet people who are like-minded and can sort of be a sounding board and help develop your own ideas.
So that's a good point. So you're not alone. It's like to the person that wrote us this question, you are not alone. And the other thing I say, it'll get better. Like, just wait and you'll be the one that gets to teach like the next generation of engineers. And it's honestly not that long. Like a lot of states, you only have to wait like 4 years before you can take your professional engineering test and get into that position where you do have more of a say. So it's not all that long. And I will say, when I was looking through some of the old emails I got on this question, 2 of them were from people at state DOTs. And, they don't feel like they're wanted or needed there. So they're trying to look to get out. And I would say, stay there. Like, we need you there. Like, just.
No, I think that's actually a really good historical point too. Like, you've been around long enough, Wes, to remember how in the 1990s, like the idea of a city DOT was kind of weird in most places because transportation was just part of public works.
Yeah.
It was about paving the roads and just adhering to whatever standards were set by AASHTO or what have you. And it's really been a bit of a quiet revolution in the last 25 years to think of transportation in cities as being about more than, throughput and maintenance of roads. It's about quality of life. It's about supporting multimodal mobility. It's about a lot of things that you can't do purely if you're purely focused on whisking through as many vehicles as possible through an intersection. And I think the battle's kind of won at the city level, at least in terms of like the DOT staffing perspectives there. Like if you go to NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, their annual meeting, it's, people believe in the things that this person who contacted us believes in. The real the front lines, I would argue, are state DOTs. And some are doing well, some are doing less well. But for those who might be listening or in school and thinking where they could go, I really agree with Wes. Like you could potentially make the most change right now and progress, I would argue, at a state DOT.
And I would go the other way. So like from the city level, like so Denver, cities like Denver, like maybe the war is won in those places and you go up to the state DOT, we need help. But go the other way to the smaller towns.
Okay.
They need help too. Like a good friend of mine is director of public works in a small town in Connecticut, and he's in charge of all the transportation. And I, going back to our previous discussion, I ridicule him all the time for a lot of the stuff that he's cool doing. And, but he's not in that same world with NACTO. Like that feels like another planet to the stuff he's dealing with. So it's not something that's on his radar or think should be. So those places need help just as much as the state DOTs.
I think that's a great point too. And unfortunately, right now, you notice neither one of us is saying go work at the federal level. I don't think DOT is what it is. Let's just put it that way. But the reality is, like, yeah, you can make the most change if you go further down a level or two. So I appreciate the question. It was thoughtfully put, and yeah. I hope the thoughts here are constructive to that individual. Time for mailbag.
Right. Yeah, you got a question, I heard.
I got a couple, and we were just talking about Halloween. Let me start there. This is from Peter in Washington State, who I'm going to read it, but it really builds off what we were saying earlier. You and Wes have discussed Halloween. Is it a dangerous day for children or a low risk day? That day, motorists injure a higher than average number of kids. 4 times as many children are killed, according to a 1997 CDC report. But CDC misunderstood those observations, Peter in Washington says. The CDC wrote that children might be more likely to sustain pedestrian injuries on that evening than on other evenings. But there's no way that 4 times as many kids are out during trick-or-treat hours. The injury risk is way lower than average. There may be more injuries, but in total, but they're actually less likely. So this is a nerdy question, but Wes, what do you think?
Yeah, it's about exposure, right? So
totally,
the risk per kid is lower in that night than maybe any other night because there's so many kids out there. But the number of kids getting hurt or killed is 4 times higher than any other night of the year. And to me, that's what matters. Like if you treat it like a public health issue where we're trying to save lives, like we need to treat that night a little bit differently. It is sort of the difference between the way we typically measure road safety is like per mile driven. And like the further you drive, the safer you seem. And you can seem like you're safer if you're driving more, even if more people are dying. But that is not the result we're looking for. And same on Halloween. Like we need to save lives, not just make it seem like we're safe because the risk per kid is lower than it was on another night.
Well, but this is another point that Peter made in his message. Thank you, Peter, for a long message. I'm sorry that I can't read all of it. But there's 2 ways of reducing the total number of kids killed or hit during Halloween, right? One is you have fewer cars out in areas where the kids are trick-or-treating. And the other is you just tell the kids to stay home or have the kids not go out door to door. And I think what Peter was saying is like too often the narratives here are be careful with your kid when you're walking with them, or don't, or maybe think twice about having your kid go out door to door, period. Whereas perhaps the argument really should be directed at drivers saying, don't drive that night. Like get home
Yeah.
early before it's dark and don't be out. Any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. I mean, my stepfather, who passed away a few years ago, he would always call New Year's Eve amateur hour, and he was, basically trying to make the point like there's drunk drivers everywhere. Stay off the roads. Like it's a night that you need to be careful. But we really should be reducing the people that are drinking and driving. And same with Halloween. Like the danger isn't these kids walking around. The danger is the cars and the people driving those cars. We need to reduce the danger at its source, and it's that. So that's where I think we should start and try to message in that direction.
Yeah, there's a victim blamey tone to a lot of the Halloween and children pedestrian death narrative, I would say. I'm checking out time. Should we do rail drinks, or do we have time for another question? It's your call.
I can do one more.
All right. This is a bit of a out of left field question, so get ready.
All right.
This is from Darren. Darren asks about public transportation. Darren asks, is there a place in transit for a class system with premium sections for cars, for instance? Is this done anywhere? It seems like one of the biggest challenges in transit is that people are actually snobs. Is there a way to take advantage of this?
I mean, so they're talking about like if you're on the train and you buy the nicer seat in a different section, or like on a plane where you're in first class. Is that?
Yeah. I think that's what he's saying.
Maybe. I mean, I guess you'd have different prices for different parts of the bus.
I think it's a thought provoking question, but it's also not one I think that it requires a little bit of thought to maybe wrap your head around. So I knew this question was coming. I can offer a couple quick reactions if you want to see if you have an idea too. I mean, one is, let's just keep in mind that at least in the U.S., snobs are not taking transit. Like those, the transit riders tend to have lower incomes by considerably than the average person, and so like let's just be very candid that this is not a priority or issue for most transit riders who just want to get somewhere quickly, safely, and they are often lower class or lower middle class, if you will. So that's one point. Another is that it's a little different from how Darren framed the question, but I do think it's interesting how there are some places, I believe, I want to say India does this. I please don't quote me on exactly where, but there are some like women only train cars.
Yes,
which is a way of providing a better experience for a segment of the population. It's not exactly like first class versus second class, but it is trying to provide a somewhat different riding experience for a group of the population. And I respect that. I think that can make a lot of sense in many societies.
That's also a reaction to a huge problem they have in terms of like sexual harassment on their transit. So it's in my class last week, I actually showed a picture of Jay-Z riding the train to the Barclays Center to his concert. Like he was on the train with everybody else. Like, what should happen in that case? Should we have a train just for him and his friends and everyone else in the next car? I don't know. Like,
no, I think that's right. I mean, that's like there's that sort of like a pithy quote. I don't remember who said it, that a truly wealthy country is where the rich people ride public transit, because the transit's so good that that's what people want to do. And I kind of think that's right. And I think that trying to segment the population or segment transit riders by class in this way, first of all, it's just sort of irrelevant for the US, at least given how shoddy our transit service is in most places. But I think it might actually come directly into conflict with the kinds of transit service we want, which is such that it's really a quality service for everybody. And it capitalizes on those economies of scale that allow that to happen.
And when I visited Norman Garrick in Zurich, I mean, that's a place you definitely notice exactly what you're saying. Like, I do remember, I probably have a picture of it somewhere, like these women like in a mink coat, like with all this jewelry on the tram with us. So it is everybody there rides their transit because it is a better system. Like, I think, at least back then, the longest headway was going to be like 7 minutes. So you never have to look at a schedule. You can just walk out whenever you're ready. And even
Yeah.
if you just miss the tram, it's like a 6.5 minute wait for the next one.
Hmm.
So it's just a such more useful service than we're usually provided anywhere in this country. So I don't know. Like I could imagine like maybe if you have some trains with, there's that picture going around of I think it's in Sweden where they have these train cars that have almost like a playground on it for kids, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
maybe you have special tickets for that, or maybe there's other things you can do in that genre where there's maybe great Wi-Fi in that one train, whatever it is. Like there's food, like there's something you're providing an extra service to, but you don't have the wherewithal to do it along the entire, like all the
I
different cars of
mean,
the train.
maybe, but let's do that once we actually have like fast, frequent, reliable
Oh
service.
yeah, I'd much rather
Like
start
that
with better
is,
headways. Like get the better
yeah.
headways first,
I
and
mean, at a moment where many U.S. transit systems are on the back foot and struggling to just
yeah.
maintain their service, it's an interesting theoretical question, but I don't think it's very practically
Now, I will
relevant.
say at the same time, I've heard of transit agencies like they're spending millions of dollars to shave like a couple minutes off like the total time from like A to B, and I'd say you're much better off putting that money into making the actual travel on it better or giving
Yeah,
people like
yeah.
real time information, like stuff like that. Is much more useful to people. Like make the seats more comfortable. Give like good Wi-Fi. Like keep it clean. Like stuff like that makes a much bigger difference than cutting 1 or 2 minutes off the total travel time.
Hmm. Well, it really does depend on what the travel time is, right?
Well, I mean, if it's like a long distance bus, let's say from Boulder to Denver, they have an express bus. If it's 34 versus 36 minutes, sure, that matters, but I'd much rather make that 34 or 36 minutes much nicer where you have good seats and stuff like that. That's my
Eh,
point.
gosh, we could really talk a lot more about this because I think this is what Jarrett Walker calls elite projection, where you have to be careful not to, with basic transit service, the people using it by and large are not affluent like many of those who are commenting on transit. So you have to be careful not to assume that what a upper middle class person wants is what a lower income person who rides transit a lot is necessarily going to value. And often like sort of nice add-ons like Wi-Fi or USB chargers or whatever are things that seem great to those who don't ride transit all that often, while those who do ride transit a whole lot and have lower incomes are like, just please make sure the bus comes on time.
You got to start with the basics. You got to start
Yeah,
with being on
yeah,
time. You got to start with frequent headways. Like stuff like that matters more
totally.
than anything else.
We should do a drink.
All right. Let's see. I guess I'll go first. So what I have here, let me.
This is, by the way, this is Rail Drinks. We're recording this at a time where somewhere it's happy hour, so that's why we always like to end with a
Yeah.
drink. Go ahead.
So what I have here is a Dale's Pale Ale, and I believe this is only brewed in Colorado and North Carolina. So it kind of hits both of our states. But like when I
Nice.
first got here, like this was the beer that was everywhere. So like my friends from back home would be like, "Oh, does everybody drink Coors Light out there in Colorado?" I'd be like, "If you go to a party, it's hard to even find a Coors Light. Like Dale's Pale Ale was the beer, and kind of still is for a lot of places. So that's what I have here today. And
I'm
it's
just
funny, my
sorry you
friends,
can't find a Coors Light. I feel bad for you. The
well,
taste of the Rockies.
my friends in the Boston area still drink Coors Light all the time. Like nobody here
There you
does.
go. There you go.
So
And I've got, well, we're recording this in October and it's apple season. So I've got some apple, so smushed apples, like apple juice with bison grass vodka, which from Poland, which Polish friends introduced me to as a good fall beverage. It's actually really good. So I can see you smirking at me, Wes, and I don't care. You can judge all you want. I'm going to drink it.
enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers. Ooh, that was good. It's like apple pie, but with a kick. Um, should I do the sign off?
Yeah. So I will say next time we're probably going to be back to a pre-recorded one. So the live one probably won't be coming for a few weeks, but we look forward to doing that again as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In the meantime, we always love hearing your questions. You can ask anything you like to lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. You can always contact me at davidzipper.com. I have a newsletter called Paved with Good Intentions. Wes doesn't ever want to hear from you. in all likelihood. But if you
A
Google
little bit.
carefully,
If you
you'll
really
find
need
him.
me, you can find me. Yeah.
Yeah, you can find him somewhere. But thank you for listening. Please do, if you enjoy the podcast, just tell one friend and leave a review. We'd be really grateful. And we'll look forward to talking to you soon.